studio session on India Takes the Helm of the G20, Priorities for Digital Engagement. At the G20, digital issues have been covered with the Digital Economy Working Group, the Trade and Investment Working Group, and across a lot of engagement groups. So it's become a bit of a tense question because the developed and developing world don't always agree on what needs to happen on data flows, on data regulation, on data governance. So maybe I will first ask Fajar to give his opinion because you've just come out of the Think 20 process. Congratulations on CSIS's great work during Think 20. Having a first-person perspective, what do you think are the questions, the burning questions for the digital economy?
Well, I can say that we are now dealing with the mega trends. I know that several factors, including the rise of the technology and also the demographic changes, I think are the factors that lead to this digitalization and the digital economy. And I can say that we know that currently we are considering there a structural transformation is there, and then we are talking about the changing population structures globally, not only in Indonesian context, but also I think we are talking about this massive or significant digitalization that's going on in Indonesia and also in other parts of the world. So from that point, I can say that it's true that this digital economy is the sectors that I think we have to maintain, and talking about the continuity, and I believe that it's also one of the priority issues that Indonesia, as a president of the G20 this year, trying to focus on. And I believe that the T20 as a official engagement groups, for the G20, we also highlight the importance of these digital transformations. Not only talking about these digital infrastructures, but also I think we are talking about this digital talents and also the digital literacy. I think that's two issues that might be relevant that we are going to discuss when we are dealing with this digital economy, Jhanvi.
So if I were to ask you, is a digital public infrastructure, digital public goods, is that somewhere you see the G20 coming to consensus?
Yeah, well, I know that from the perspective of the G20 member countries, I know that they are unique characteristics. I know that some of them are developed countries, right? I mean, like India, Indonesia, well, can be categorized as a developing countries. From the point of view of Indonesia, I can say that Indonesia is still struggling in order to improve or dealing with this digital divide that's happening in Indonesia. When we are talking about the geographically, Indonesia consists of so many islands, like 17,000 islands, and I think the issues of digital divide always become a burning issues that have to be handled by the government. And I believe that not only Indonesia but also other G20 member countries, or probably other countries that have a same characteristic with Indonesia. But I do believe that we should have a coordinated policy, in these digital issues, and perhaps that kind of coordination or collaborations might have a good impacts in the digitalizations.
I think that's evidence that developing countries think alike, because I would very much like to see a joint task force of the Digital Economy Working Group and the Trade and Investment Working Group, which are both discussing digital issues, right? And where we can find consensus between the two, because of just the variety and the number of issues that the digital economy encompasses. So, Dr. Rai, if we can't come to consensus internally, can we come to consensus at the G20 level on issues of the digital economy, given that security concerns don't always match with trade concerns? Data flows is good for trade, but sometimes bad for security. So do you see the G20 coming to consensus on this issue?
Let me deal the subject little slightly different manner. Jhanvi, today's global GDP is crossed $100 trillion. Okay. the digital economy is itself must have crossed $40 trillion. That's the volume of the digital playing a role in the entire ecosystem, whether it's a manufacturing or a social development, education, defense. That's the role is being played. Today, digital is something which is a small part of the entire cost of the maybe any equipment or a project or a plant or somewhere, but driving the efficiency of the entire system there. The currently we are talking about, and a new phenomena has happened there, which is a convergence of technologies there. So whatever digital transformation my friend has spoken to, now it will have to be seen in respect of the digital convergence of technology that you have to see. Now this whole phenomena is a paradigm shift than what we have witnessed and what we have seen. We had policies, we have frameworks there, we had security system, we have a law, we had the best practices there. It's all were tuned to the earlier digital kind of a world, which was moving in an incremental kind of a scenario. But today we are in a kind of a scenario which is a paradigm shift. Okay, so this paradigm shift, technology is an integral and essential part of our ecosystem. And when I say ecosystem, it means the everything together there. Look at everything there. So, I mean, and this whole ecosystem is now getting created as a heterogeneous system there. Different people coming, different saying devices, software, people, philosophies, networks, framework, they're all becoming heterogeneous there. We have we have a privacy policy. GDPR came, someone else came, CVPR was there, India also came, we have taken impact for that. So all fragmented policies there. So if data protection law is a fragmented policies there. New phenomena of the crypto, you see, there some the countries are, whenever they want, they start trading in crypto. Whenever they want, they block the crypto. Whenever they want. So complete different scenario is emerging there. This scenario requires there's something, not something which is confined to one jurisdiction or one region there or one country there. How can you have a data localization in this scenario when the things are moving on internet? It's not possible. Blockchain, the blocks are distributed all over the world. Blockchain, we should not link only with the crypto. Blockchain is the underlying technology used for all kind of application. Land record, banking, my own digital transformation is a basically authentication. So the entire thing is so distributed there across the world, the cross-border things are there, that we need some sort of a consensus on a broader scale which should be implemented. See, today we have a privacy issue. We need a common, the entire security issue today will decide the investment. The investment pattern will be decided based on the security issues there. The companies follow practices, the company doesn't follow practices. The particular CEO has an understanding of security, not security. Jhanvi, time has come when the role of a CTO and CEO will be combined together. The CEO will have to be knowledgeable to do the technology aspect there. So we need some common framework. We need some consensus to work with. Businesses will not work. Business will not work there.
So, sir, if I were to ask you then, can we have a best practices agreement, do you see, much like the Paris Agreement? Can we have a best practices agreement on digital governance at the G20? Do you think the G20 can achieve such a consensus? Given the the diversity of partnerships, given that the next 4 presidencies are developing country presidencies, and we have a unique chance to showcase developing country concerns, is it possible to sort of bring these countries together to have a consensus, given we represent 80% of the world's GDP? So,
Jhanvi, it will have, I said, we have no option. We need to do that because this is the scale of the technology we are talking about it there. How do we do about it? We have a fragmentation in almost everything. Technology has become geopolitical. Technology is a weapon today. In the geopolitical scenario, you have seen the Russia-Ukraine war, how the technology is being used. It's like this. Data is being used as a kind of a tool to deny the businesses or asking for things. We need to come to some consensus. But in a fragmented kind of a scenario, I'll give an example of UNGG. We worked start from 2001 and 2017. We came to some understanding little bit there. Unique experiment started, the two groups started with the UN. One is the open-ended group and the UNGG, UNGG group there. But with the Russia-Ukraine war, whole agreement has come to, I don't know, haywire. Okay, so we need to evolve that. So best is that in a fragmented kind of a world there, we need to move in steps and stages there. If I have to suggest, if I feel my common sense says, my experience says, if it start talking on the issues directly in G20, it may be a little more fragmented there. So let us evolve a platform. G20 is a very powerful kind of a forum there. All countries, which means the technology, they are there. Okay. Once these G20 countries agrees on a common some framework on in a consensus they come, I think the world consensus will come. It will be easy to take it to the UN. So I think we should set up a platform where who should identify the issues, discuss the threadbare issues, and lead to the common framework, larger common framework within which each country should define their own framework. They are broader. You see, I'll give a clear example to you. There was a UN adopted an ancestral law in e-commerce there. It is a broader framework. UN adopted the ancestral law. Every country, the UN mandate, everybody should evolve their model law around the UN ancestral law. We also evolved the IT Information Technology Act there. So we need such kind of a framework that will come from the consensus. So it's important to discuss, to evolve a platform, set up the platform for identify the issues, set up the platform, evolve the framework, bring a consensus. That is the approach I think that will work in this already fragmented, heterogeneous kind of a world.
And Japan did try that on, data-free flow with trust in 2019 at the G20, but we had our reservations, maybe because it was a very specific issue. But I understand Indonesia is doing something very interesting on something that Dr. Rai described. Maybe you want to talk about the data society?
Okay, if I may to add, regarding the consensus itself, I can say that, I know that it's very difficult in order to have like a one-fit-all policy, and then I believe that sometimes the coping mechanism sometimes doesn't work, when we are dealing with this consensus. But one thing that I would like to, propose, basically, at least among or within the G20 member countries, I believe that we have to, promote more and more exchange and dialogues, and then probably, we should recognize to have a mutual recognitions, how to deal with the specific issues that might be, there is an intersections, between one country to another countries, and I believe that perhaps, we do hope that, at the end, the goals, the goals that we are going to aims, basically, we are talking about the policy harmonization and policy, the policy harmonization. So I think, talking about the consensus itself, even, Indonesia, of course, have their own challenges. We have our own challenges. We also have our, strengths and weaknesses. But again, like I mentioned to you before, even when we are talking about the leaders, we are talking about the government official itself, sometimes I think we have to make sure that all the government officials have to be open-minded, because again, this digital economy is something that, well, I can say it's kind of like a new playing field for everybody, especially, when we are talking about the government. And perhaps, the talent is very important, the government itself have to understand this kind of, new creatures, quote unquote, and then they have to, understand about, the best practices and the lesson learned that just mentioned by Dr. Ray before. So, yeah.
So I think in trade terms, how I like to look at it, correct me if I'm wrong, is when we look at data governance, somehow it becomes a tariff versus non-tariff issue when you look at the WTO and they want to put a moratorium on e-commerce and e-commerce customs duties, that is. And meanwhile, when we look at standards of data protection, they're very much like non-tariff barriers to trade, very much like SPS and TBT measures. So what is the right forum then to discuss data governance?
No, so G20 is the right forum. As I
Uh,
said, look at the ecosystem of the world. I talked about trillion dollar is the GDP of the world there. G20 controls, how much? 80% of the entire is by G20 countries only. G20 is a right platform to discuss it. You see, it provides you a multilateral approach. It provides you a multi-stakeholder approach also there. Right forum, all the captains of the industrial countries are there. I'm saying that among them also there's a lot of they have their own views depending upon their countries, but the technology is bringing more uniform kind of things. Okay, I give you a very lighter example of that in a lighter thing. We need to evolve a framework like USB. Okay, USB in a computing language, everyone hooks to the USB. Whether it's one country or the other country across the globe, USB is a standard. We follow that kind of a thing. TCP/IP is another common standard. We've been networked together. We follow that standard there. So I think we had to evolve such common kind of a consensus. These are consensus standards there. We need to evolve those kind of a things. And G20 is a right platform. See, G20 is not the theme is largely the green and the pollution or the environmental issue. That is a larger theme of that G20, what's happening there. But can you achieve without technology? You cannot. Can you achieve without standard there? Cannot. You look at the whole example of 5G is before us. One of the country I won't name, they wanted to sub 6 gigahertz kind of a bandwidth, and some other what standard was sub gigahertz standard. Ultimately, that country was talking about 6 gigahertz and above. They came down because white standards are there, economies of scale required. You follow a common standard, consensus came there. So I think G20, UN is becoming very large. See, that's why G20 has a unique advantage of giving a shape to multilateral, because countries are there. They can have side-by-side discussion. They come and do that. Limited numbers there. They can give you a multi-stakeholder also kind of a scenario there. And more thing is that these countries are largely the economy is played by the industry, private sector. Any framework which you devise there, anything you devise, so far the private sector doesn't have a responsibility. Okay, so when this G20 gets involved there, I think the private sector will rope in a much better way. Private sector will will be responsible to implement, because implementation will be done largely by the private sector there, because they are all economies ruled by the private sector. So in all, it's a win-win situation. And right forum, if G20 takes up the consensus, it will take some time, Jhanvi, I'd say. It's a very fragmented kind of a world, heterogeneous world. Someone looks this way, other looks this way, east, west, and all kind of things are there. I think we need to work. There's no option there. There's no solution. Otherwise, it's going to be a disaster. Let me use a very strong word.
Coming back to the data, I really do want to hear about the Data Society Index that you're coming up with, because I think it addresses some of the concerns that Dr. Rai has raised. So maybe if you talk a little bit about that research, we will have perhaps a way forward for what India can do and achieve during its presidency.
Well, the thing is, I can say that CSIS itself, already proposed, the digital economy working groups. Like my colleague initiate the Digital Society Index, and perhaps it can be applicable from the pillars that we are going to propose, basically talking about these digital infrastructures, digital skills or talents, and also empowerments. And perhaps that's the starting points that at least we could identify what is lacking, from our side or from, from other countries. And the thing is, I'm just want to elaborate more about the stakeholders, multi-stakeholders engagement. It's true that I believe that we know the engagement groups of the G20 also involve the businesses, the think tank. We have women 20. There are so many, religion 20. Even we have that 20. But again, again, this kind of ecosystem, I think they have to work hand in hand. And I believe that the things that I learned when I participated in the workshop in the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, there are like 5 T's that we are going to, that I think it will be relevant in order to expand the sectors. The T number 1, so basically I believe that the academia, the think tanks, the CSO should promote what's so called as the, the evidence. So they have to conduct more and more study and research to give more and more truth, and this is the first T that I'm going to talk. And then the second T, I think, the transparency is also very important because we are dealing with multi-stakeholders, and I believe that when we are doing so many, discussions and so many forums, perhaps, the transparency can be promoted. And then after that, the third T, perhaps, with that kind of exchanges and dialogue, perhaps we can build trust. That's the third T that I'm going to discuss. And then the last 2 T, basically, of course, the talent itself. I think we have to promote the talent. Even, the government officials have to have at least a similar capacity because, Indonesia, in terms of the government forms, Indonesia, I think, is a bit similar with India because we are not centralized anymore after the New Order era under Suharto at the time, but now we tend to be decentralized. And perhaps, the local capacity, the local government capacity may differ from one provinces to another provinces. And I believe that, and then the 5 T's that I would like to discuss here, basically, yeah, again, we are talking about the technology. I think this is the main points that we think that it is very important for, expanding this digital economy. That's my points.
I think that's also
Jhanvi.
important given the amount we depend on services trade, for instance, as a country. And all of the aspects, the T's that you've mentioned, are an element that impact all modes of services, especially mode 1 in digital services, because mode 1 is so dependent on data flows, as you mentioned, Dr. Rai. So what I'm getting is that the Think 20 and the Business 20 need to sit together and perhaps come up with something for the digital economy.
Yeah.
And maybe Parliament 20 can sit down with us and come up with something on digital public goods and architecture, perhaps conversations between the engagement groups, which can give an informed opinion to the leaders for their consideration.
And if I may, probably Dr. Ray could respond. When we are talking about the regulatory models from the perspective of regulatory frameworks, I don't know whether, because we know that the EU or Australia are trying to focus on the self-regulations, and then I think other countries like New Zealand trying to have that kind of co-regulation. And I think in case of Indonesia or probably most of the developing countries, they prefer to have like a regulation that tend to be like a top-down. Like, I don't know, perhaps in my opinion, like in the future, in order to expand or to promote this digital economy expansion, I can say that the players have to regulate themselves. I mean, like, I know that probably the co-regulation, it will be like a win-win solution for the players and the government. But I think, because we are dealing with this new playing field, and then we are dealing with these new sectors, and then sometimes both stakeholders have to learn each other. So I don't know. That's my opinions on that.
One
Dr.
more
Ray.
hesitation to this, sir, because we are turning to you for answers. India has been burned before in terms of WTO agreements like the ITA. We've had concerns on the JSI on e-commerce. So we do have this hesitation on creating or committing to any agreements as such. And I think all developing countries tend to share that hesitation. So where do we go from here?
Jhanvi, first let me come back to G20. I'll answer both the points there. My view, I mean, answer means I'll give my view. See, today the practices are so different worldwide, countries there. You said business, you said the technology forum, government. You typically use those words there, and very rightly you used it there. I think these have to come together. First, start sharing the best practices, sharing the examples to do that, Sharing example will encourage the capacity development there. That is a need of the hours there. We can standardize it because there can't be more than two methods to do a thing correctly. So at least let us understand, you share these are the two methods or one method or three methods of doing correctly. That understanding will drive us towards the consensus also. Because, I mean, we know this is right, this is right. Okay. Sooner or later you come around that and this is right and right. That's one. India also has a truth prevails everywhere. That's what our mythology also says like that. So I think the sharing experiences, sharing your examples, sharing case studies, that's the thing which is the must happen when I said you set up the platform to do that. Now coming back on the issues there, technology is changing so fast. Okay, keeping law requires to check the misuse or to bring some relief to the consumer users there. The law will always lag behind. Technology is evolving by leaps and bounds. In 1 month, if you are not well versed with the technology, to couple of months you are out. You don't know what is happening there. Things are changing so fast there. So, in my view, self-regulation is one of the best kind of a practices which should be promoted. The government role should be minimum. They should only enforce and check it there. That's where it should come up there. But this regulation again, Jhanvi, again coming back to your question, consensus. That is very important. That is very important there. Consensus need to come up things there. And I think that will evolve because compulsion is there today. Coming back to you use your digital public infrastructure. Okay. What India needs to do is that technology is changing very fast. Okay. We are also evolving our own infrastructure policies. We are evolving the infrastructure part of it. We are evolving data protection. Our area, we have taken it back. Now we are trying to do that. Indian telecommunication bill is already before us there. I think we need to look at more positively, constructively look into the technical directions there. As I said, there is no way. You cannot, you have to adopt technology there. There's no way. We need to mold our policies framework, looking those wider angle of interfacing with the worldwide there. And again, getting more on the, giving thrust more on self-regulation rather than a regulator control.
So the data empowerment protection architecture of the Niti Aayog, do you think there are learnings in that which we can take to the G20 perhaps? Or, you know, because they do have a system of a consensus regulator, but we are discussing less regulation. So consent managers, things like that, you know, going into the nitty-gritties. India, I think, if I were to put it, India has come up with a sort of proposal for itself. Scaling up is a very big part of that. So do you think there might be learnings in it? Which
no, we must. You see, both ways it will help us. We take the framework to the G20. We will learn what their comments are there. We can incorporate those things in our framework there. It will help us to improve it there. That's one. The good points we are able to sell to them also, maybe they will also learn from us. That will be the first stage of coming to the consensus. First, we should sit down together. We should explain our views together. At the end, my friend has come from Indonesia, I am from India. We are merging together that we require a self-regulation. Because we have been discussing 30 minutes, you have put us question and you are asking us. So we have come to this. So let us sit down together. Sit down together, put our views there. I said there can't be more than two ways to do the correct thing.
Right.
Digital technology either up or down.
Right.
There is no third method there, 0 or 1. Yeah. That's a digital technology, 0 or 1. So sitting together will help us to come to consensus faster there. And that is the essence of the time. That's all. I would finish my statement with that.
Okay, so I think, you know, like, I know that it's supposed to be like, I know, like, closing remarks from my points, basically, you know, like, perhaps, you know, like, under, you know, like Indian presidency next year in 2023, I hope that there will be a continuity, at least, you know, like, the three priority issues that Indonesia bring, you know, like, regarding the global health architecture, like the energy transition and also the digital transformations. And perhaps I know that probably, well, we are talking about the dynamic changes, that happenings nowadays, and perhaps, probably India would add, other important issues or sectors that might be, promoted later on in the 2023.
Well, this is obviously a conversation we will have to keep having for the next couple of months over India's presidency and Indonesia being part of the TRICA guiding us. Thank you both for your opinions, I think, and we come to the end of this session, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jhanvi, for a wonderful moderation.
Thank you.
And it's a wonderful discussion. I agree with you. This is an evolving concept, and as we discuss more, we'll learn more also. Yeah. And we'll be able to, once we learn more, we'll be able to contribute more there. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.